Hi, I'm William Stewart. Welcome back to our verse by verse study on the book of Acts. We're in chapter 2, that great chapter talking about the beginning of the church. And we've seen this. The church began as the Holy Spirit came down at the beginning of the chapter. The Jews, the unbelieving Jews of the diaspora and who lived in Jerusalem, who had crucified Christ, saw the miracle of tongues and which was a sign, as noted in Isaiah 28, of condemnation from other countries on the Jews. Being perplexed by this, the Apostle Peter, now emboldened by the Holy Spirit, rose up and said, "Now is the time of salvation," quoting Joel 2. Then he condemned the Jews of Judea and Jerusalem for crucifying Christ. But then basically says, "You lost, we won." And that comes with the section today about the resurrection. Let's start in verse 24, chapter 2. Peter continues his dynamic sermon. God raised up Christ, having loosed the pains of death because it was not possible that he should be beholden it. So we discussed that last time. Verse 25. For David then speaketh concerning him, and then he quotes Psalm 16, 8 to 11, written by David. I don't want to go through the whole passage he quotes, excuse me, but important is verse 10, where David says, "Because thou wilt not leave my soul in hell, neither wilt thou allow thine Holy One to see corruption." David here is foreseeing Christ. So it's noted to be prophetic about his resurrection. He explains in verse 29, "Men and brethren, let me freely speak to you of the patriarch David," so the father David, "that he is dead and buried, and his grave's with us to this day." So whoever was resurrected in this psalm, it's not David. He then in verse 30 says, David's a prophet, knowing that God swore with an oath to him. This is Psalm 132:11. Swearing an oath was common in the Old Testament times as a way of doing a contract. It was part of making a contract. They did not have many or good available writing utensils and paper during that time. They didn't have paper. And so they had used other sources like parchment and animal skins to write. So instead of writing down a contract, part of what they would do to help people remember is take an oath. And this is what God did for David. What was that pertaining to? That he, from 2 Samuel 7:14, would be the progenitor of the line of Messiah. He would have a throne, a kingdom, and a house forever. So he swore to him by oath that the fruit of his loins, according to the flesh, he would rise up Christ to sit on that throne. 2 Samuel 7:14 and surrounding verses. He foresaw then the resurrection of Christ. Back in Psalm 16, that his soul was not left in hell, neither his flesh to see corruption. This Jesus hath God raised up, wherewith we are all witnesses. So he hits him again. Christ was resurrected. You have no proof that he was not. Where's the body? Where are the witnesses that he's been seen? We have 500 witnesses, as it says in 1 Corinthians 15, of people who have seen Christ before he ascended. Okay, so what have we covered today? Peter puts in context the resurrection of Christ into the Jews' own Old Testament scriptures from 2 Samuel 7:14 and most pointedly from Psalm 16, telling him basically, you tried to kill Jesus and you're guilty of this, but he resurrected. All this is part of salvation, which of course he wants him to do, and we're leading up to this point. Okay, great sermon, very informative. Thanks for joining me. Please come next time. We'll continue with Peter's speech.